Another social worker once said to me, you're going to end up like working in health and social care. And I was like, no, I'm never ever going to work in health and social care.
I counted 18 different bodies that you are presently supporting.
We've not even mentioned your OBE.
People always assume that my interactions with care started when I was sectioned and I first came into contact with mental health services. But I suppose it started a lot earlier than that. And it gave me a real kind of fire in my belly to want to change things in the world.
This whole podcast is all focusing on what good care looks like. But actually, I don't think we've talked a lot about managing yourself before other people and what that looks like.
There is a lot of not managing sometimes, so it's like a lot of rest. I'm learning much more to be in tune with like my body, not just my mind. And if you want to do really good work, sometimes you have to do less.
You almost have to be actively relaxing as well, don't you? You have to actively be doing something that will kind of take you away from that.
Do something that stretches you, is outside of your comfort zone. And most people would take that as like maybe jumping out of a plane or going off and doing something really fancy around research. And for me, like what really stretches me is just sitting down with a piece of paper and just doodling.
What would you say to people that say there's too much time and energy to put into co-production?
I think sometimes we overcomplicate it. That's when I give my presentations and I said, like, this is the formula to co-production, and I've made up this magic formula. Like, you invite 2 people with mental health challenges, 2 people with a learning disability, you have 4 meetings a year, 1,200 pages of minutes, and etc. and etc. And people are writing it down. I'm like, no, it's a joke. The way you start is you create the conditions where people feel they have something to offer. As a fixer, like I feel like I always want to fix and support people, but genuinely listen to, like, hear means that you're just listening to what people actually are saying, not interpreting it, not trying to fix people, not trying to respond, but just someone just sat there kind of listening and being there for you in that moment. Whatever you say is much more healing and hopeful than actually someone trying to like build a 10-point plan that's going to help you fix your life. Because I think ultimately listening to hear helps people find the solution to themselves. And we never talk about love in social care.
No, we don't. It's almost, well, we're almost pushed against it because it should be a professional relationship.
And I'm like, you know what? A lot of these people have not had the right love at the right time. Let's talk more about love.
Yeah.
Well, save the best questions to last.
Hi, Isaac. Lovely to see you.
Nice to see you do as well.
Like we haven't been here. So I counted on the run up to this 18 different bodies that you are presently supporting, working with maybe multiple roles in some of them as well. So from the NHS England member of the LGBTI sounding board through to the work with TLAP, which you're very well known for, lead commissioner for Greenwich as well, for co-production and inclusion, Sky, work with Sky, the creators of change, work that you've done, and there's so many more, ADAS, and there's a long list.
Yeah.
Tell me the secret to this. How do you fit all of this in?
You just, because when people say work, I've never really sort of seen it as work. I think it's like a lifestyle choice, or maybe not a choice, a lifestyle way of being. And I learned very early on that it's better to spread where you are to influence, because often when people don't like what you have to say, they might draw the bridges up. So I do a lot of like work across different places because I think there's different opportunities to influence.
Yeah.
I've been with TLAP forever, and some of those organisations, like I've had different roles and it's emerged and they feel like family more than they do work, if I'm honest. In other ones, it might be just a short kind of piece of work around co-production or around anti-racism or influencing on some level around the lived experience perspective. So 18, I think my personal assistant would argue with you, and she'd probably say it was more than 18.
I think some of them had multiple roles, so yeah, definitely adding up.
I hope like 26 leads to a better, definitely a better work-life balance, a different balance, but there's more need than ever to do these roles.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, I know you've talked really openly about your own mental health, and I think when I see that list, I see the stress that list could potentially create in terms of managing other people. And I know when we were on the run up to this, that just your communications, it felt like that you had created some quite clear boundaries about, you know, how you need to work and what that looks like. Do you think that kind of self-management of that is really important, and that it's enabled you to do all these things? Because they're quite giving roles as well. I think they feel quite personal, and that like potentially you're giving a lot of your energy into them when you're there. It's not like you are you hold back on opinions either. So I feel like they could take a lot out of you emotionally. Like, how do you balance that? I think people are always keen to learn those kind of ways and methods that people manage their everyday.
So I'm not sure that I do balance it. I think I try to balance it by, one, I think being really clear around where you put the emotional labour in. So often that the ask is to come and help us do a piece of work, and people think the work is about, for instance, setting up a sounding board, and the outcome of that sounding board that we will commission really great services for people. And I'm like, that's not the work. The work is supporting people to be their best in a space where you're inviting them to really share difficult bits of their lives. So the majority of my work has taken a real shift in terms of focusing on people's well-being, my own well-being, being really okay to say, do you know what, I'm not okay. I can see this is not good, and pausing, which people don't like, but it's really important. Yeah.
I think we talk a lot about self-care, don't we?
Yeah.
And it's that. And I think this whole podcast is all focusing on what good care looks like. But actually, I don't think we've talked a lot, maybe a couple of times, about managing yourself before other people and what that looks like.
Yeah.
It's an important step, isn't it?
It is. And the things that people don't see around managing is that there is a lot of not managing sometimes. So it's like a lot of rest. So I think people on the outside would say, oh God, Isaac's really busy, or you're you're influencing, doing lots and lots of stuff. But then don't realise that I need a lot of rest. And I have a lot of people that support me to look after my own mental well-being. A really big part of that is having dogs for me. A really big part of that is being able to disconnect.
And one beautiful one here today.
Yeah, really beautiful one that we rescued. Then there are things that I think are really important. So I think I'm learning much more to be in tune with like my body, not just my mind. So I've like booked in to go and see a complimentary therapist, which is really, really great. So, and that really came around because I was doing some work which talked about self-care in a really interesting way. And I thought like I'm really terrible at self-care, and most people are. And actually what people said, it was really important to talk about community care. It's really important to talk about the self within that, but you have to do something. You can't just talk about it. You have to actually prioritize. And if you want to do really good work, sometimes you have to do less, which is hard when you want to be everywhere and you're a busybody like me.
Yeah. And I think sometimes your personality can work against you, can't you?
Yeah.
Because if anything like me, I've got quite an active brain. So that the quiet moments, actually, I naturally fill them. So you almost have to be actively relaxing as well, don't you? You have to actively be doing something that will kind of take you away from that as well.
Yeah, and then I've got a lot of good people around me that have been saying, do something that stretches you, is outside of your comfort zone. And most people would take that as like maybe jumping out of a plane or going off and doing something really fancy around research. And for me, like what really stretches me, just sitting down with a piece of paper and just doodling. And I've kind of got into creating space for just doing a bit more creative stuff. And then the busy brain comes in and says, need to get some funding, apply to the Arts Council, and
Put that on the list.
put it on the list. But just like being in nature, being creative is really important.
I agree. So if we can go back to the start a little bit, well, where is the start in someone's life? I don't know. But in terms of your links to care, can you tell us about those first connections with care? Because I know that you had, I know that a lot of your early experiences has probably led to your ability to then help others and share that experience and moving forward.
So it's quite interesting. So I think people always assume that my interactions with care started when I was sectioned and I first came into contact with mental health services. But I suppose it started a lot earlier than that I was someone that, as a child, experienced mental health challenges and had support around that. And then quite early on in my life, I lost my mum, and that meant that there was a lot of care around me and trying to help me kind of navigate that. So I was aware that there was this thing called social care, this thing called children's services. Didn't really make sense to me at the time.
No.
And then I suppose when I became very aware of it is when I was in my teens and I started to experience worsening symptoms, ended up being sectioned and accessing like acute mental health services.
Right.
And in that moment I was like, oh, this is very odd, because I went from a person with lots of things to a person with fewer things, just by the nature of kind of becoming quite fragile and mentally unwell and needing that support. And I often will talk about, at the time, I remember there was this psychiatrist who I do owe a lot to, but they said something that really stuck with me, that please don't, because I was constantly worried about, like, you know, how do you overcome something like this? And they said, oh, like, Tom, you'll never have to work again, you'll be on benefits, we'll support you with medication. And at the time,
that was a positive,
but they thought that was a positive at the time. And they were trying to reassure me, but they didn't really understand that I'm a person that has never stayed still, let alone being quiet in my mind. And that thing that they did made me kind of have lots of self-doubt and limiting beliefs around what I could be. Because it kind of, overnight you go from someone that, and the label of bipolar, the label of being sectioned, like, just changes the way that the world sees you, and actually changes who you are in the world. So I suppose, like, my first manic episode wasn't the problem. People saw that as a problem and it was problematic, but what the biggest challenge was, like, just recovering from, like, interacting with care, because it was so difficult being in a place where so many people were unwell. There were very little options for people, so we didn't have, like, don't think we had as many aspirations and hopes for people, and people were really stuck in that medical model back then. Like, we'll give you some medication, we'll send you off, and you probably won't do much, very, very much in your life from here.
So it's about managing that situation rather than where can I go, where can I stretch myself, what's next for me. Okay, so how did you move from that position then? Because you said it changed the way that the world saw you. Did it change the way that you saw yourself?
Definitely. So, and I needed a real kick up the bum. So I felt really sorry for myself. And I met this little old lady called June who had 3 sons with severe and enduring mental health challenges.
Okay.
And she would come onto the board and give people cakes and try to convince people to come and talk about their experiences. I've got nothing positive to talk about, because there was no positive experiences, which convinced me. And then I saw that actually there's benefit in, like, talking about things that don't work to improve them. And that really is why I do all of the stuff that I do, is because somebody once upon a time ago said to me, like use all of this negative stuff and turn it into a positive.
Yeah.
And she was trying to do that for her sons, and then she encouraged other people, and she, I suppose, led the way a little bit in terms of telling me that, like, not to feel sorry for myself, and actually, if you're really that angry, like, come and be angry in this space.
Yeah. And did she create the space to be angry?
Yeah, yes. So she was doing like these, and that they were called patient community meetings, which is very funny, because no one had any patience and nobody wanted to be there. Just for the cake.
And was there any community?
Yeah, I think there was a
Good.
community. I think it's really interesting if you've ever been in a closed culture or sectioned. And I always make a joke of like, the easiest way to escape a hospital is very simple. You just walk behind the doctor. It's not hard because they're always like walking. So you spend a lot of time wanting to get out or back into the world. But then when you go back into the wider world, it's quite scary because you become really institutionalized really quickly.
Yeah.
And there are a group of people around you get to know. There is an over-reliance on support, I think.
Yeah.
And you get familiar with that. And I suppose like people that end up in prison, people that end up in hospital, there are really fixed points of your day. So there is a line to get your medication in the morning. There is breakfast, there's lunch, and
Incredible structure.
And I think people just become really comfortable with that.
Yeah.
And I could see very early on that that was a big problem, and lots of people that really struggled when they were going back into the community and going back to live in their own homes would come back really quickly because they just couldn't manage that switch. And it's something that I've always tried to work with and do is, and I suppose that's why I do a lot of peer support. So when you ask the question about work in all the organisations, most of the stuff that I do is like helping someone fill out a benefit form, or talking to someone about feeling suicidal, and that is really difficult stuff. But actually, it's more rewarding than it's difficult.
Yeah, good. And then, so did you have any transitional support from hospital?
Yeah, I did.
Home?
I had an interesting. So when you get sectioned, all of this support's thrown at you, basically. So I spent a long time kind of, I suppose, struggling with my mental health, and lots of people making recommendations about needing support, but the thresholds and the levels, and it wasn't that proactive. We would talk about like proactive and early intervention now. There wasn't that. So, but when I got sectioned, I was entitled to a thing called Section 7, 117 aftercare.
Yeah.
And I was supported by a housing and care organisation. And for 2 years, I had a support worker that came and supported me, who was amazing. And they helped me like kind of make that shift. But they were kind of within something that's quite difficult to understand because it's your first time in this space. And there's lots of moving parts. So there's a social worker, there's a psychiatrist, there's housing, there's all these people trying to organise your life so that you can start your recovery or management journey. And then there wasn't that stability other than this support worker who would be, would come 3, 4, 5 times a week.
Yeah.
And then towards the end, maybe once a month. So it was very positive. And that was an organisation called Look Ahead Housing and Care. And I think it was called Putting People First.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which you can get for about 2 years.
Yeah, that was a good step funding.
Yeah.
So from those experiences, do you have standout moments where you thought, yeah, this is what good care is, this is what good support looks like? I understand. Looking back now, you probably maybe didn't feel it at the time, it was just what was happening. But when you look back, do you think they're the moments that we need to recreate elsewhere when you're explaining this to people?
Like the joyful moments and the times that it doesn't feel like care. So what people don't want to feel is like their lives are being managed. What they want to feel is someone's coming along and just being alongside them when they're struggling. So I think I was really lucky to have moments where people pushed me as well. Like people said, like you can do this, because I think it's hard to move from I'm a really different person. It's much harder because you're living with a new label, a new way of being, lots of medication, lots of adjustments, systems and processes you don't understand. And there's still to hold hope, but actually people held that hope for me. So that was like really good care. And the soft things, like I'm a great one for a mug of tea and a bit of cake, and just someone just sitting there and asking you about yourself. Like I think sometimes we get into that very like transactional kind of tell me everything, rather than, or here's a bit about me, like, or what's the points of connection that we can have as human beings.
So there's something in there, isn't there, about giving a bit of yourself to that situation in order to expect someone else. Like, how do you build trust without trusting that person's also going to take your information and not treat it badly? You know, like it kind of works two ways, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So from then, how did you step into, you know, all of the roles that you...
I was bored.
You're bored?
I was bored. I was like heavily sedated on antipsychotics, and bored was not a good combination. So I was really bored, actually. And I started to go and share my experience. So I started to find places where you could try to influence kind of mental health systems and services.
Maybe because of June. Maybe because June told you that was a thing that was a thing. Exists.
Yeah, because of June. And then I got involved in the research group, and then I got involved in something else, and then it just kind of snowballed. Yeah. And then what I realised is that actually there were more people in the world like me than I ever imagined there were. And the spaces that I needed to be in at that time where there were people like me. Yeah. So I don't know, like people say like you've done really well for yourself and you've got a career and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, oh, it wasn't really thought out. It just kind of, I stumbled into it.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, good.
Yeah.
Wow. I think I like having these conversations on the podcast, because I think it demonstrates like how we build up our values and like how we, you know, what are the things that lead us to be where we are today. And I think there's always an interesting story there from every person. What did that time period teach you? What did you kind of take away from it? Do you feel like there was massive amounts of learning, or?
I think it opened my eyes to how unjust the world was, and how, in some ways, like I'd lived a very sheltered life. I wasn't aware of like all of the world complexities and how difficult it was for people. And it gave me a real kind of fire in my belly to want to change things in the world. So I think I was really aware that not everyone has the same opportunity of outcome, experience, or access to certain things that might be education, work, good support. And I wanted to do something different. Maybe there was a selfish bit of me, I wanted it to be different for me, but actually I've really loved like supporting other people and found it really easy to support other people than support myself. And also I got more out of kind of, it sounds really odd this, but I get more out of supporting other people than focusing on myself.
And I've had that discussion with a number of people who have struggled with their mental health, that they've found that actually providing a new purpose. I was talking last week with somebody about intergenerational support. So the idea was that some people that have struggled with their mental health, that are in that position where they're looking to the future and they're thinking, right, what's next for me? Actually having somebody to look after at that point in time gave real purpose. And maybe it just reminds people their value, that they do. It's not just about being cared for. I think there's a real vulnerability in being cared for, isn't there? And actually, if you can then care for others, you're kind of stamping on the world that actually I have purpose here. I've got something to give. Did you find that helped?
Absolutely. And there's a really great organisation, Comrades, which is a movement, and they said, like, when someone's struggling, ask them to help you rather than you helping them. And that concept is really, even before they coined that phrase or way of kind of talking about it, really just was the way that I was. Like, you know what, like, if somebody has something that they can find purposeful and they enjoy doing, it's going to be much more beneficial to then lots of medication or lots of missed opportunities. And people have been able to like reauthor their lives and their narratives in a way I think, wow, like I didn't know if I would still see that person, you know, alive next week, let alone now that person's happily married and the chief exec of an organisation. And yeah, just there have been tremendous amounts of lost hope, but there's been tremendous amounts of like hope that's been used in a really good way.
I think that just shows to me that when you have a moment of a mental health crisis, it can feel like the end, can't it, of lots of, you know, there is no, like you talked about hope, and I think that's important for all people, is to have that hope. But actually it shows how far, like, that it's just actually a point in time. And I wonder whether there was anybody that's helped you recognise that this is just a point in time. This is just a part of your journey.
Lots of people. So I could sit here all day and talk about all of the people that weren't really great at that stuff. But there's been like a few people that have been just amazing. So I remember this one social worker, David. I thought it was a bit odd because he'd asked me, like, what's your dreams and goals, and like, what do you want to be in 5 years? I was like, social workers don't speak to people like that.
What you want to?
I'm going to report you to your manager. And another social worker called Luann, who once said to me, you're going to end up like working in health and social care. And I was like, no, I'm never ever going to work in health and social care. And then it was like only a couple of years ago, I went back to do some work at that local authority. She was still working, and I was like, you were right, I was wrong. And I think what they did is they didn't see the moment of hopelessness in the same way that I did, or didn't collude with it. So they literally gave me a bit of a push and said, like, you've got this, you can do this, you can, you know, stay here and be stuck, or you can think about what are the small bits that you can take control of in your life that could potentially lead you to something different.
Yeah, absolutely. When we spoke recently, I remember this really vividly, and I think you've got a lovely way with words. I think that's why people invite you often to speak, because I think you're really articulate. And you said about one of the most important things for you was people listening to hear and not to respond. Do you want to talk about that? I think.
Do you know what you're asking me?
Moment.
Yeah, so you ask me something that I struggle with myself. Because I feel like as a fixer, like I feel like I always want to fix and support people. But generally listen to, like, hear means that you're just listening to what people actually are saying, not interpreting it, not trying to fix people, not trying to respond, just being alongside someone. There is nothing more than, and I know there are like big challenges around how we are in space with each other, but just someone just sat there kind of listening and being there for you in that moment, whatever you say, is much more healing and hopeful than actually someone trying to like build a 10-point plan that's going to help you fix your life. Because I think ultimately listening to hear helps people find the solutions themselves, rather than people saying, I think this will work, I think that will work, and actually most people don't have that time. How many of us have time where people just listen to us? And I really relate it back to like my friendship group. We talk absolute nonsense sometimes, and there's not a lot of purpose in it, but it's really joyful. Because we're all listening to just hear what each other's been up to. We're all curious around like, what have you eaten? What have you done? There's no fixed agenda. There's no fixing. Yeah,
I think you're right, and that's the beauty of friendship groups, isn't it? And I think that's I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with now that we've brought a lot of our socializing online, and you don't have those moments so often, do you? So maybe that's something we all need to practice. Just being with one another. You said about so do you think that kind of listening to hear is the skill set that you bring into co-production groups and when you're advising people? Do you think, because you said earlier about actually I'm not necessarily there to tell them what to do, I'm there to help facilitate listening to other people? So do you think that's what you brought into that?
I hope that's what people would say about me, is that what I bring as a person is those really good skills around inviting them to find the solution. So like I could come in and fix everything tomorrow for most organisations, but that would just be what I would want, right? It wouldn't be what people want.
Yeah.
And it probably wouldn't last very, very long. So I'm always a believer of like, if you create the space, and something about psychological safety that's really important, there's something about good facilitation, there's something about modelling, like really modelling how you want to show up, even when it's really difficult to show up. That it's okay to show up in your messy self, it's okay to show up with your loud self, your quiet self, like there's space for everybody. And then maybe inviting people to maybe like think about how much they contribute, or is there a different way they can contribute? Is there a reason why someone's shrinking themselves in a space, or is there a reason why someone isn't noticing that they could bring someone else into the space?
Yeah.
So I hope I bring that. I think I do.
Yeah, I think you do as well. Something I've noticed in your post, your recommendations, you talked about in your, the centering the voices of racialized individuals in that kind of co-production piece. You talk about committing to anti-racism as an ongoing process. And I think I've heard this a few times in the things that you said. I think you said something about, I think I saw something written that you said about let me try and jog my memory a second. When, in terms of your own journey with your mental health, that somebody said that you were so inspiring, that kind of like job done, and we love that story in Adult Social Care, don't we? That kind of the good news story where we've gone, right, this thing was happening. I've almost done that today. We've almost built the structure around that journey today, where something was happening, something went wrong, but then we did this intervention and then everybody's fixed. And then we move on. Oh, isn't that great? We did a good job. Do you get frustrated about hearing like that it's done? That we fixed people. That
I think it's important to hear it's done, because that there's more work to be done. So when I hear like anyone say, oh, the work is done, we've fixed this, I'm like, no, you have to start all over again, because I think when you are acutely attuned to wanting to tackle any injustice in the world, you have to do a lot of like self-learning. You have to do a lot of being prepared to learn. Learning isn't something that I think human beings do really easy. Like I think sometimes like we learn a bit and then we think we've mastered it. And actually the art isn't around the learning, it's the practice. Yeah. So when I say like to people, you have to actively be anti-racist, like what I mean is like, it's not just about having a set of goals. It's not about reading a book and thinking you've cracked it. It's about how do you intentionally turn up all the time to create a difference in the world. And if that's around racism, how are you doing it across like maybe your policies and procedures? Is really easy to focus on, but then you might have a culture that doesn't necessarily match that. And for me, it's like, how do you have like a rounded space, place, a sense of like connection? And there are lots of fears, and the next bit of my journey is really interesting because I'm really exploring how we turn difference into dialogue. Because I think in a world where there are really different social political views, there's lots more racism, there's lots more othering. And I was born in like the 80s, and I love the fact that in the 90s there was a lot happening. And when people talk about like history, And then I talk about mine, like, you know, I did the Prince's Trust, the Duke of Edinburgh, the New Deal. There was a New Deal for everything.
It all felt very hopeful. Didn't it? Like things
Yeah.
were improved. Things are only getting better.
So I became who I was in that space.
Yeah.
And there was lots of hope.
Yeah.
And there was lots of good people doing lots of stuff. And I know we've had austerity, lots of political change and lots of societal change. But I go back, and I always go back to, like, there was always hope. And what we need to do is, even in times where there feels like there's less hope, to create like a point of connection with people, and how we change that difference into some dialogue is going to be really important going forward. And even in my own journey, the people that have been very harmful to me, and like psychiatry, for instance, wasn't always great. Why do I go back and work with psychiatrists and the profession? Because it can be better.
Yeah.
And if I'm not there, then who else is going to be there? And that probably sounds like really grandiose and big-headed, but I don't mind being grandiose and big-headed.
You've earned it now.
Yeah.
You're all right. So while we're on that note,
We've not even mentioned your OBE.
Oh, God. Hard.
How do you feel about that?
It's hard. Doing anti-racism work.
Yeah.
Accepting no OBE. First, I thought it was a complete joke, because got this wet letter through the post, and it was from the Cabinet Office, and I was like,
Okay.
this is a joke, like,
Yeah.
filled it in, sent it back, never heard anything, so I thought, oh, it definitely was a joke. And because you have to be really secretive about it, still don't know who put me forward, kind of know why, the work that I do. And a lot of my friends, particularly the people that are racialised global majority, I was struggling with, like, should I accept something with,
it's a tricky one, isn't it?
you know, empire in it? And they said, like, you've earned it. And I think it was really funny because I just received this week my pictures from Windsor Castle, and there's like Princess Anne, like, with her eyebrows that kind of like grimacing at me, and then me laughing. And I suppose it goes back to
What had you said to her?
I said, like, what I said was, when we first met, and I've met Princess Anne quite a few times, when we first met, I had hair. But there's only one of you and lots of us, so you probably won't remember. And she laughed, and we both laughed. And everyone was like very scared, because you get like really scared and it's quite nervous, but it was really joyful.
Okay.
So it was really fitting. But I took my OBE because I believe it's important for the work and the recognition it gives people lived experience. And I want that to be used in a really positive way.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that many more people get recognised, because there are moments like when the work is so hard, and so many people, like, I sometimes sit, particularly when I have like moments of needing just to kind of be validated, and I read all the lovely emails and messages that I got, and they're great and wonderful, they're absolutely beautiful, but on the journey a lot of people didn't say that stuff, and they'd assume that I understood that stuff was in, like, so when I've had conversations with people said, we love you and we think this about you, but they never really said it on the journey, what they said when I got the OBE. And I think that's what I've started to do, is be more intentional around reminding people in the everyday, like, I appreciate them, and I love the work they do, and we need to make more platform for people that don't necessarily get celebrated when they're doing really laboursome, emotional work.
Yeah, there's a lot. I think social care is the best sector, but we're biased. But there's so much unnoticed work, isn't there? I think that's the thing. I think people do it because they feel rewarded by it. Like you said, like when you give, you receive. Like, it kind of, it does work like that. But it would be nice.
And the fact that this year, like, we had a few people who, it's weird to think, like, so I'm looking, and then I see, like, Ona Smith gets a CBE, and then Tanya Moore, a social worker, gets an MBE, and then I have like this personal connection with them, so I message him and saying, like, I couldn't want for somebody, you know, better to get this, because you do such a great job, and you probably don't get a lot of thanks for it. And if this is one way of your peers and people saying thank you, and both of them, when I like reached out, were like, this means so much. And I was like, yeah, we don't often, because we're always like trying to fix a system, or we're always told that there's not enough money and there's lots of problems. Don't think we celebrate each other enough.
Yeah, because there's so much that happens on a daily basis, which is great. Yeah, that's so true. One of your ways, so just going back to co-production for a bit, I've noticed that a way that you've obtained information on lived experiences from other people is just simply going on LinkedIn and having an open invite to share that information and to invite to focus groups and all of that. So you're quite open about, like that feels like a fairly straightforward method. What would you say to people that say there's too much time and energy to put into co-production? Because I think we do get that pushback sometimes, don't we, about the budgets are tight and how we're going to, how we're going to stretch to support people to share their experiences in the development of something.
Yeah, I think more and more attention will be paid to the amount of money spent on co-production, because I think we're in a really difficult position around our local offers. I think sometimes we overcomplicate it. So, for instance, last year, and I know that lots of local authorities, including the one I work for, we spend lots of money doing stuff, and we spent relatively little money and had a couple of sofas in the town square that spoke to people. A few sandwiches, a couple of sofas, didn't cost very much, and we learned so much, and it was really joyful. So I think we need to use every means and mechanisms that we can to invite people in, because not everybody understands what it's about, what they can contribute, what benefit it can bring. And I think sometimes we need to say to systems like, stay back, like hold off a sec, like this is not about systemizing it, it's about like humanizing it. And when people get into that space, and one of the biggest transitions I've ever made isn't being sectioned, it's actually working for a local authority. That's the biggest transition I've ever made, because
slow your pace down.
They're very systemy, right? And they work in a particular way, and I'm like, emergent human will outwin, so we can fight for the next 6, 7, 8 months, but you will always come around to my way of thinking, because that's how people want to be met. People don't want you like to be organized into neat little boxes. And sometimes when I give my presentations, it's really funny because people get really serious, and I say, like, this is the formula to co-production, and I've made up this magic formula. And this formula, like, is a Greek formula, and it says, like, you invite 2 people with mental health challenges, 2 people with a learning disability, you have 4 meetings a year, 1,200 pages of minutes, and etc. and etc. And people are writing it down. I'm like, no, it's a joke. The way you start is you create the conditions where people feel they have something to offer. And I've never been in a space where people don't talk. Like, even like really shy, or people that don't often talk a lot, I mean, they can. I am always struck by the person that speaks the least in some of the spaces might say the one thing that changes the total outcome of where you are going. And that's why diversity is important. That's why creating space for big voices like mine, and then smaller voices like other people's, and don't systemize it, humanize it.
And that's where listening comes back in, isn't it? All that. So what's next for you?
Oh God. So my friends would be saying more joy and rest and relaxation. So there's recently been we have to be honest, there's recently been a lot around disappointment of like applying things, not getting them. And I think I learned never to take no as an answer, just keep on replying. So I will get my Churchill Fellowship, because I really want to do a Churchill Fellowship. I've applied twice and didn't get it. I was a bit heartbroken, but I'm going to apply next year. I want to influence them, so I'm not bombarding them with like, let's make this relational, not application based. I think I'm really interested in this body of work and that I've been developing around like storytelling and anti-racism and connection. So I was hoping that 26 would be a year with more time for different things, but I think in reality, what next is doing the work that I've identified that I want to do. And I suppose I'm very lucky that I've got a lot of people that invest in me. So I've got a lot of people that I don't have to go and convince. I can say, I want to do this project, and they'll go, okay, how can we,
What do you need?
what do you need? And that's really lucky. I know that's really privileged, and not a lot of people have that. What next is not to bowl the ocean and do everything at once. Maybe think about, myself and my husband, we've just got a new dog. We've got 4 dogs. Don't ask me why.
I know why.
Because we love dogs.
I love dogs.
We have applied to be a shared lives family, and we got accepted. I don't know
Brilliant.
why they accepted us.
Congratulations.
So that might be on the horizon.
Yeah.
Welcoming someone into our home. And I think what next for me is very different from what next for my family and my husband. So I'm very career driven, very purposeful I want to continue to go and develop and do new things. So yeah, I think I'm going to continue to grow in a space where I think there's lots of opportunity to grow.
Yeah, it feels like people are willing to listen. There's change afoot. It feels like it's those kind of times in social care at the moment, which, really lends itself to your, your knowledge and your experience and bringing that in.
And it's really shit and hard in social care at the moment. Like the people I work with, sometimes I feel like, oh God, like I wish they could see, working as a lead commissioning officer of co-production and inclusion, being difficult to get my head around how to work in a very structured system with hierarchy, because I don't do hierarchy, I don't do structure. Yeah. But they don't see the joy of like going to a place where people are being supported. And just before Christmas, my colleague Deborah, who is someone I admire tremendously for all that they give to social care, another person with lived experience, we went to a mental health provider, and we sat there and we had conversations with the people being supported. One of the support workers sat at the back of the room, and they'd never heard all that lovely stuff, and they burst into tears, and I'm like, oh God, we've got someone in tears here, like this is not going well. And then I realised they were tears of like joy. They've never heard that people felt loved, and we never talk about love in social care.
No, don't. It's almost, we're almost pushed against it because it should be a professional relationship.
And I'm like, you know what? A lot of these people have not had the right love at the right time. Let's talk more about love. Yeah. Let's bring love in the way we show up. And let's be kind to one another. Like we're so much stronger if we work together.
Absolutely. Yeah. Definitely. So for you then, I have to ask the question, what does good care look like? So I'm hearing listening, I'm hearing love, I'm hearing presence, being there for somebody and just without any expectation. Is there any more to it?
I think so there's like what I think there's typical good care looks like is when you see the value that someone can offer the world when they can't see it themselves, when you try to make the world a little bit more inclusive for them. And I think that the world isn't as inclusive as we want it to be.
Yeah.
So if we have to do a little bit more to make it inclusive, and we've got a bit more time and a bit more skill to do that, I think that's really good care. I think trying to be better at what we do all the time, not in that kind of like, not in that kind of grandiose way. It's like, I mean, like
continuous improvement.
Yeah, like
formalizing it.
Trying to like listen. Like if listening isn't our thing, just trying to actively like listen a bit more. Yeah. Or if there's an area where we think, you know what, that person just needs us to tap in or step in to that, try it. Like I'm so into like the human connection stuff,
I
which
think that's about being given permission to fail, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think all of these things that we've talked about today, that's about where the structures have almost pushed us to dehumanize, to not just feel that connection and work through it in that way.
Yeah, so I'm doing like at the moment this book. Don't ask me why I decided to do a book on co-production, a chapter on co-production, and I was thinking about how I illustrate purpose and meaning, like for people, and for me, the metaphor, like or the image, is like a tree. So the roots of the tree are connected to all these things, and it's like being flexible, causing good trouble, as Clinton would say. You know, fun, creativity, love, compassion, all that sort of stuff. That's the kind of like foundational stuff. And what sits in the trunk of the tree is the way that people show up. So that good care is essential. Then you get your leaves. And ultimately what you want is the fruit from the tree, where people then actually are being their best selves. And you get to experience that. There's nothing better than that.
No, there's nothing better than that. That's brilliant. Thank you so much for your time today. Slightly unusually, one of Neve that you've met today, she's got a question she'd like to ask you. So we're going to throw it over to Neve for a second.
So, first of all, I just wanted to thank you for joining us today. My questions kind of focus more on a wider cultural scale. I saw your post on LinkedIn about World AIDS Day, where you shared 5 steps to tackling inequality, with one of them being education and breaking the stigma, which really applies to like a lot of marginalized groups. And I wanted to know how I think a lot of efforts can sometimes cause more harm than good, both individually and on a corporate scale. So I think of like BLM's Blackout Friday and also Paris is Burning, which I think was a really powerful piece of media in kind of pushing war culture AIDS into the mainstream. But it was also critiqued for exploitation and cultural appropriation.
Yeah.
So how can people keep systemic learning human and genuine?
Well, save the best questions to last. Huh?
What a power question.
So for me, how I think that you do it is you really invest in like the ethics around. So I do a lot of storytelling, and so I don't ask people with a intended outcome of like what story do you want to tell. I help people privilege the bits of their lives that they want to share. And that post that I shared around World AIDS Day, like HIV and my HIV identity used to be such a big part of my life, and it's shrunk because I think a number of reasons. One, I think treatment options have got very different. 2, I don't feel that I at all feel stigmatized by being someone that's positive, and for a long period I did. And I think what and how this relates back to your question is when we genuinely support people to share their living experiences in a way that is trauma responsive, in a way that isn't extractive. It's not about like trying to get something out of someone. It's about elevating and amplifying. I think that leads to better social change than having, 10-point plan where we want to eradicate, I suppose, violence against girls and women. It's easy to do on paper, but the hard thing is it's the culture that you want to change, right? It's the way people feel, how people connect to it. So great advocate of like connecting to it on a human level, and we won't all have the same experiences. Not misappropriating people's knowledge, paying people for their time, making people feel like they have generally invested in changing the world. I've never met anyone that doesn't want to change something by sharing their story, and I've collected and shared, but none of their stories belong to me. Like I feel like I'm a bit of a guardian of like supporting people sharing their stories. What was the second bit of your question?
So it was about keeping systemic learning, where we kind of look at the broader context. immediate outcomes. How do we keep that and story that we do share stories? But my mom was very human, for genuine.
So I think we need to flip the script in terms of the vulnerabilities that these groups have, and actually talk about the abundance that these groups have because of some of the things that have made them vulnerable. And that might be because they're HIV positive, or they've had a experience that society can stigmatize. The other thing that I think is really important, the active bit in anti-racism applies to the active bit in all of our learning. So not just saying that we want things to be better, like how are you going to do it? How are you going to achieve that? So how do we educate and give people knowledge? How do we center people in that experience? And for me, like being okay with like, you are going to get it wrong, but actually it's the learning and it's the repetitiveness of like, if you want to make things better, it's around changing the hearts, not only the minds. And if you focus on the hearts and minds together, like I feel like you can get there. And not detaching our own individual experiences or our social political awareness from it. I sometimes think like, I'm often told, do not post stuff like this because it's really too political. And I think you can't be into social justice and not be political. Even when you get it wrong, it's important to be aware. And what I want people to be aware is that we can create change together, and we need to do it together. So there's no point in, I suppose, having an idea of change if it isn't led by the people that you're trying to support around that change. And often we do to rather than with people. So I hope I answered your question. It was a very hard question. Yeah.
It was good. Thank you. Thanks for your time. It's been lovely having you here today.